everybody. Welcome to this month's Denise Amber Lee Foundation Wednesday webinar. We're so excited to have Cindy Sparrow with her presentation, Empowered 911, Widen the Window, and Raise Your Resilience. Towards the end of the webinar, we will share the link for you to sign up to receive a certificate. We will also be uploading the webinar to our YouTube account later so you can watch the recording at any time or share it with anybody. And also the foundation, if you're not familiar with us, we offer on-site and online courses, as well as third-party quality assurance services and other opportunities throughout the year, including our monthly Wednesday webinars. So for more information on any of that, you can email info@deniseamberlee.org, or you can follow us on Facebook. That's probably the best way. But yeah, from here, I'll let Cindy take it.
Thanks so much, Emily. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on the webinar. Happy to be a return visitor to share some tools and some information with some of my very favorite peeps in this audience, and in this industry of 911. So I'm just going to go ahead and load the slide deck here. Okay, perfect. Emily, just going to do a quick check to make sure that you can see that okay?
Yep, looks great.
Wonderful. Awesome. Great. Okay, awesome. So today we're going to talk about widening the window, which is our window of tolerance, and raising our resilience, and why that is incredibly helpful for us, especially in the work that we do here in 911. So a little bit about me, if we haven't met before. My name's Cindy Sparrow, and I'm the CEO and founder of Cindy Sparrow International. But I do have an extensive background in public safety. So I have 28 years experience. I've worked on both sides of the radio, in the 911 center in fire, EMS, and police dispatch, as well as a ground and flight paramedic out in the field, predominantly in fire and EMS-based services. And so went through the ranks as a trainer, QA, QI, and a frontline supervisor, and then all the way up through to a deputy chief, where I had the privilege of leading teams in Southern Alberta, Canada, in Lethbridge, as well as in Central Alberta in Red Deer, where we had large regional primary PSAPs with a multitude of fire, EMS, and police agencies that we dispatched for. So enjoyed my career for a long time. And just before COVID hit, about 3 weeks before COVID hit in 2020, I took the leap to retire early from the service and start my own company so I could come out and work with all of my sisters and brothers in the industry across the globe. So I do a ton of work in Canada and the US. I've done some work in the UK as well, and we'll be heading out to Europe in April for the ENA conference to meet some more colleagues there as well. So my expertise and my focus is I can help in comm centers with any kinds of projects that they might need. But I do have expertise in 911 leadership, in operations, and then also in mental health and trauma and resilience. I'm an educator in that realm. Some other information about me: I was a past president of APCO Canada here in Canada, and I'm currently the president of NINA Canada West. So still very involved in the industry. I really, really care about the people that work in it. And I think that we have a lot of change that needs to be made systemically, and it's going to take a lot of us to do it. And I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and show up for us so that I can. So to that end, enough about me. I would love to start talking about what we're here to discuss today. So I want to talk a bit about our current reality and why widening our window of tolerance and increasing our resilience is so incredibly helpful. So our current reality today is that we do have a deeply compromised system. We have a lot of challenges. We have a lot of budgetary cutbacks. We're working amongst a staffing epidemic, because we can call it a staffing crisis, but the reality is it's been going on for so long, and there's probably not going to be a quick fix solution in sight anytime soon, that it's having a great toll on our people in centers across the globe. In our work, we also have a high exposure to stress and trauma. And so while it is rewarding work, it is also very challenging, and it certainly has a big impact on us. And like I'd said before, there are some big shifts that need to happen industry-wide to address these issues, but they're not going to happen big enough in a big enough way in time to help us out right now. And so that's why I wanted to bring you, I always endeavor to bring all of the information that I can with some tools that you can actually put into applicable use, where they're not so system-wide that they're unachievable or they'll take forever to do, but that you have resources and tools at the personal individual level for you to help navigate as you move through your career and through life. So The reality is, who helps the helpers? I had someone working with me once. I was working on a project with, she called me the 911 for 911, but that's really what we are. We have to be our own 911 for ourselves because we're out there saving everyone else, but nobody's coming to save us. And so we can do that by making sure that we take care of ourselves and each other, and we have the information and the tools to be able to do that really well. And I just want to also state that although we've made leaps and bounds in the mental health impacts of our work and how it shows up for us and the impacts that it has and the resources and tools, we've still got a lot of work to do to normalize things. There's still a ton of stigma and shame out in our industry that keeps us quiet and stops us from reaching out for the help and the support that we need. And that's a very near and dear cause to my heart, which is why I do so much work in this realm. Okay, so I want to give you a little bit of facts and stats because that's one of my favorite things to do. The more information you have, the better off you are. I want you to understand why it matters that we are very real and normalize conversations about mental health impacts of our work, and give ourselves the slack and the compassion that we need as we move through our careers. So in a recent study in Canada, the Canadian Institute for Public Safety Research and Treatment, it's called CIPSRT. They work with public safety personnel and military all of the time. There's a conglomerate of professionals in the mental health realm that included us with APCO Canada as well. And they did a nationwide survey of public safety personnel. They included public safety communicators in that. And they found from the statistics, more than 50% of public safety personnel screened positive for one or more mental health injuries or disorders. And now remember, this survey didn't go out to every single person. Like it went out to everybody, but not everybody responded. So it's likely that that's probably higher. 48% of public safety communications participants were screened positive in this category for one or more mental health injuries. And then really, really important to note is that public safety communicators and female participants in public safety professions were among the highest at risk for suicide. And if we look around in our centers, we are predominantly female. And so it's really important to know that. And when we have facts, facts are freedom. That's what I always like to say, facts are freedom. So when you have facts and data and research that supports it, it doesn't lie. And I want you to know it's not you, it's the job that we do that impacts us in such significant ways. And the more information we have about that, the better off we are. So we can shift that blame and stigma off of ourselves and each other, and then just show up and reach out when we need help, or be there for somebody else when they show up and need help. Okay, so why widen the window of tolerance and increase our resilience? The first thing I want to say is we don't want to create all of this extra capacity for managing stress and navigating our trauma exposure just so we can heap on more. I want you to build a five-lane highway of resilience capacity. That's what's going to help you stay in I'm going to tell you what the window of tolerance is here shortly, in the zone of optimal operation or function so that you can navigate the things coming at you without it taking you down or shutting you down and putting you in survival mode. And I want you to have the tools and knowledge to take care of yourself anywhere, anytime, because that helps you stay healthy. And we need you to stay here in this industry and do the really good work that you're absolutely meant to do. It's not work that everyone can do. We know that. We're a bunch of 911 unicorns out here, and we're not growing new ones every day. But I want you to be as healthy as possible while you do this very important work that you are meant to do. Okay, so let's chat about the window of tolerance. So the window of tolerance, if you've not heard of it before, it's really the middle zone between what you call the hyper arousal zone or the fight or flight response, as you probably heard it mentioned before. And at the bottom end of that window is the hypo arousal or the freeze or flop. So fight or flight or freeze or flop. In the middle of that is your window of tolerance, which is where that shows your capacity for staying in the optimal zone and being able to be flexible, to regulate your emotions, to be able to manage in a present state of mind what's coming at you on a regular basis. It allows you to learn well, face stress effectively, connect with the other human beings around you and to yourself, to just be present in your body and kind of open and knowing and in check with what might be going on with you. That window of tolerance, the wider it is, actually really helps you on all of the realms of your humanness, in the physical, the mental, and the emotional states. So the wider your window of tolerance, the healthier you'll be, the more capacity you'll have for managing, particularly when we are in very trauma and stress exposed environments on a regular basis, without a lot of time to regulate in between calls or in between shifts or in between work and home. That has a cumulative effect on us, and that increases our propensity for having mental health injuries that end up being longer term. So I think that's why it's really important that you understand the more you can widen your window of tolerance, it helps keep you safer and healthier and swimming through the waters that we do in our work every day. So I want you to also know that when our nervous system is activated and we're in stress response, it does that to keep us safe. That's all it does. That's its job. There's nothing wrong or bad about it. It just is what it is. There are a number of things that impact when you're going to get a nervous system activation, and we're going to talk about a little bit about that in the next bit. I also wanted to touch on because there's a lot of talk about polyvagal theory. So it is the same, it is in the same context of widening your window of tolerance. It's just saying it in a bit of a different way, so that if anybody ever talks about polyvagal theory, it's still about a sympathetic response or a dorsal response that you have. So that fight or flight, if you look at in the middle part, the fight or flight response, which is your sympathetic reaction, that's when your nervous system starts to get activated. And then when you move to dorsal, that's when you're in freeze response, which means that it's incredibly escalated. When you get to the freeze part, you get into the dorsal mode, you're overwhelmed and you feel like you're not functioning at all and you really can't do the things. It makes you shut down or freeze. But in the ventral vagal or the green zone at the bottom, that's your window of tolerance. That's where your true self, you feel safe, you feel at ease. And then they call that part the thinking brain. So your window of tolerance is your thinking brain. You're present within yourselves. You're making empowering choices when you're functioning within that window. And then you're in survival mode when you're outside of it. And here is the one thing that I want you to understand. And I think it's especially true in a lot of us that work in this industry, because we already have a large capacity for resilience that allows us to do the work that we do. The survival mode in us is really strong, and humans are built for survival first. We will give up like anything that's in our way of survival. And that's why we can make disempowering choices when our nervous system is dysregulated and we might be operating in survival mode. The other important fact that I want you to know is that our nervous systems, our brains aren't always good at recognizing when our nervous system is activated, what is dangerous versus what is something that I'm just afraid of or having a reaction to. And so it can feel like everything's dangerous because we're always in that activation response mode. And then it keeps us in a survival mode cumulatively and long term because of the work that we're doing. We don't get a chance to regulate and burn off that stress or process all of that exposure, and come back to a state of nervous system regulation. So it will keep us activated over and over and over and over again. And that has massive impacts on all of our entire being, like on not just our mental health, but our physical health as well. We're going to jump to those slides in a bit, so I won't get into that right this moment. But what I want you to know is those two important things. You're going to want to go to survival mode first. It's a subconscious thing. It's not anything you can control, but also that we have a tough time deciding between what is threatening versus like what is dangerous for us versus what is scary. But once you know that that's a thing, it's a little bit easier for you to figure out how to get to notice and then to get yourself back into a state of regulation. Okay, so how wide is your window? I love David from Schitt's Creek. He's the best. Sometimes I think he's my spirit animal. So how wide is your window? So here's how I can explain it. So initially, before you came to do this work, your window of tolerance was determined by things like your genetics, the childhood that you had, and the traumas that you've experienced along the way as you've gone through, and how your body and brain have learned to recover from the stress and trauma exposure and to regulate your nervous system. And some of us are better at doing this, perhaps because the people in our lives that helped raise us taught us, or somebody else modeled the way, or we figured it out on our own, or we somehow managed to move through and create that level of resilience. What I want you to know is everybody is capable of widening that window of tolerance and increasing their resilience capacity. So the wider your window, the greater your resilience, the more you stay in that optimal zone, and the less that trauma and stress exposure has long-term impacts and effects on you. So a few things I want to talk about here. I could spend like an entire workshop on these next two slides, but I won't today because we only have an hour. I want to talk about the trauma that we inherit. So that's the trauma that you came here with. You were born with some of this, or it was programmed into you as you moved along. So there is a such thing as intergenerational trauma, and that's trauma that gets passed down from our family members. And that is things like, it could be traumatic events that happened. For example, if your family is in a war-torn country and perhaps you immigrated to North America, your family may have always been in a war-torn country. They're going to respond differently and act differently to things that are happening in the new country that they live in when there may not be a war around. You're going to automatically have that transferred to you because they're modeling the way, and you're learning that you need to be afraid of something that you might not even know what is going on. And it could be another traumatic event affecting one or more of your family members who have like passed it down from generation to generation, and it just keeps getting passed down and nobody's noticed. And it's impacting generations of your family as you go along. So intergenerational trauma, that's what that is. And if you're from Canada and you're familiar with the residential schools that we have with that the government took children away from First Nations or Indigenous families and put them into private residential schools. They were abused, neglected. It was awful. It was that's the kind of thing that has an intergenerational trauma impact on the collective generations that come after those people that were in those situations in those residential schools and abused. The next one is epigenetics, which is you actually inherit it. It's in your DNA. It doesn't change your DNA, but you inherit it. And so I'm going to tell you, I'll give you a little really cool scientific thing you don't have to have experienced it to be able for it to impact you and activate your nervous system. I'm going to tell you about in a lab with mice. They had mice that went to a little drinking bottle on the sides of their cages. They put a little vibrating mat on the floor, so they didn't actually shock the mice. But every time the mice would go to drink, because the floor would vibrate, it would feel like they were getting shocked. And so they would have nervous system and reactions. Their little blood pressures would go up, their pulse would quicken, they would have an obvious nervous system activation. And so after they took that mat away, after it was there they left it for a few months, they took the little mat away. Even when they'd go to get water afterward, they'd go to the little water trough hanging on the side of the cage, and they would still get hijacked. Their nervous system would activate. They would still show all of those different vital sign markers that are showing that they're in activation. And then here's the really crazy part. So those mice, the mice that they did that to, so their babies and their babies' babies, so like 2 to 3 generations afterward, every time, even though there was no mat underneath on the cage that would buzz or make them feel like they were getting shocked, there was nothing to indicate them to have a nervous system reaction. They would have a nervous system reaction every time they went to that water trough to take a drink. So that's how powerful trauma can be. It can leave a mark far before we ever got here, but we inherited it and we don't know why. And so if you didn't know that was a thing, you might not know that you're getting activated in ways that you didn't even expect. So, as if there wasn't enough work for you to do, now you've got to figure out how to undo that as well. But hey, I've got some tools that you can use anyway, so that when you do have a nervous system activation, irrespective of how or who it came from or why, you've got some ways to be able to keep yourself present and regulate yourself in your nervous system again. The other thing I want to talk about, because we don't talk about this enough in our industry, and I try to bring it up every time we talk about mental health impacts, is our adverse childhood events. So our childhoods will really impact the way that we build resilience and also what our window of tolerance is like. Adverse childhood events, if you've never heard of them before, and they've got a chart here where it shows like the different levels of or the different things that are categorized. So there's abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. And there are categories under each one that will impact how many adverse childhood events you've had. And the more that you've had, the more you experience, the more it can impact you physically, mentally, and impact actually your success in life. Now, the reality is, likely all of us have one or several of these. And I can tell you that I have very many on this chart. It doesn't mean that you're destined to a life of never being able to regulate your nervous system and never building resilience. To the contrary, actually, if you can get the support and tools to know that those things could impact you and you're able to manage them because you know they exist and that they could be impacting you, I'm telling you, your success rate is quite high. I'm a pretty successful girl. And I've worked through a lot of these pieces in here. So please don't think it's a life sentence or it's going to mean that, it's going to impact your achievements in life. But without the support or awareness, it can. And so it's really important for us to know that also, because we have all kinds of things that we come to the center with. I call it the potluck. Everybody brings stuff, but we're not even aware of it. And so that allows us to have compassion for ourselves, but importantly, also for the other people that are in our centers. It's not our responsibility to make that different for them, but it could be a game changer if we shared the slide deck with them, told them that it's a thing, perhaps supported them in getting the resources that they needed to heal some of the stuff that they've been through. Because obviously we are professionals in the emergency services area, but we're not counselors. Most of us aren't counselors. So getting them connected with the right resources to help them through it could be a massive game changer for them. Okay. So the next piece is about our window and our work. So what are the kinds of things that we're experiencing at work? We've touched on these already for some of them, but I'm just going to go through them again. So think about the work that we do. So we just talked about how the work, what comes with us when we start in this career, and then building on that, what we are exposed to in our careers that actually also can reduce the window of tolerance that we have. And so those are things like the constant stress and trauma exposure that we have. We know that we don't have a lot of time to rest between calls. We're often short-staffed. In a medium center, now this was probably 4 or 5 years ago when I did this study, with about on average 6 seconds between calls where we're hanging one up and we're picking up the next one. That's not a lot of time to regulate when you think I've just, helped someone out of a burning building or helped the fire crews find them to, somebody's parked in front of my driveway and I want them towed and I'm really upset. The highs and lows of what we go through in our work every day without a lot of time to regulate. Yet we still are able, for the most part, to keep regulated enough to be able to help people in a professional manner is quite mind-blowing when you think about it. The constant pressure that we have to do things quickly. You have to answer the call right away. You have to get it right the first time. You cannot get it wrong. So you've got to know all of the things. There's a lot of pressure on us to be able to do that. Metrics matter and lives are on the line, right? So there's that constant pressure, and then there's constant change every time we turn around. Whether it's a policy or a procedure, part of our technology, the thing that is most constant in our environment is change all of the time. And that does take a toll on us as well. Not that it's a bad thing, but it does take a toll and add to that mental load that we carry every day. The environment that we work within, obviously, we know we're sitting in one spot. You may have sit-stand consoles. We work shift work. We do have sleep deprivation that happens. Sometimes our nutrition isn't always the greatest because we're eating, cold things halfway through our shift if we get the capacity to. Maybe we didn't drink as much water as we wanted to today. And then the overtime that many of us are often working, it has those physiological impacts and that stress chemical release that we have to stay in our comm center with and answer our next calls. We don't get a chance to work it off. It just keeps accumulating in our bodies, and those stress chemicals come out in different ways as well. And that is also the next point, the cumulative and unprocessed stress and trauma that we have. It does stay trapped in our bodies and brains. It can show up, it can somaticize in things like cancer, autoimmune disease, illness, injuries, pain, chronic pain and illness, migraines. There's a reference to some great resources for books that you can read about, like The Body Keeps the Score, and some Gabor Mate pieces on how our stress manifests as physical illness and pain. So one of the things that I want to talk about as well is just to do a recap on, we often don't get the time or the space to complete the stress cycle. And completing the stress cycle means like we are able to move our bodies. We're able to laugh. We're able to, do something to release the nervousness or the activation, the dysregulation in our bodies, whether it's doing some grounding, just taking a hot minute to have a couple of breaths and recenter and get back into our bodies. We don't often get time to complete that stress cycle throughout our days or even once we get home, because then we're off to running our children to places or things, or we've got errands to run and adulting to do. So we don't always get the time that we need to do that. It keeps us stuck in that survival mode, because again, we're just always hijacked. Our nervous systems can always be hijacked if we're not intentionally regulating our nervous systems and taking care of ourselves. So you're going to be making decisions from that place of survival mode, which aren't always the most empowering decisions that we make for ourselves, because our brains are not functioning at the level that they could be. Our executive functioning gets worn away, and it's not possible for us to make choices for long term. We make them out of survival mode. So the more we're in that state, the more our window of tolerance is narrowed and the more it has detrimental impacts to us. And that's when those cumulative effects happen, where mental health injuries can happen even quicker. That compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, PTSD, PTSI, our chronic illness and pain, we end up burned out. We end up quitting. We end up just being so numb that we feel disconnected from everyone and everything around us. And so often what happens is that we blame ourselves. We end up feeling like we're in shame if we don't have the resources and tools to reach out for support. Then we're not going to, and we're not going to get the help we need. We'll blame ourselves, or worse, we're worried that we'll be judged by our peers for it, or the people that care about us. And what would that do? So it keeps us feeling separate and apart, and not getting what we need. So that's why I and many others in our industry are working to make sure that we can give people the tools and knowledge to recognize the signs in themselves and in each other, because you'll notice it in someone else that you work with most likely before you have a chance to notice it in yourself. That you're able to regulate your nervous system consistently and regularly, and then get that support and recovery that you need so that you can build that resilience, not so that you can come and work more shifts. Please know that that's not what that's about. It's because I want you to have all of the tools that I didn't, that I had to find and learn along the way, so that you can stay as healthy as possible without feeling like you have to go in and save the world all of the time and work all of those overtime shifts and just keep pouring from an empty cup. I don't want that for you. I want better for everyone out here. We deserve better than that. So to that end, I just wanted to chat about how do we recognize that dysregulation in ourselves. I'm going to show you a little bit how it shows up in our centers and then how it shows up in ourselves. So in our centers, we know that we have chronic short staffing, and it is that dysregulation and the mental health impacts of our jobs that keep us in places and in situations where we have chronic short staffing. I mean, I don't know if any of you remember Titanic, but this is the old lady from Titanic. If there's one thing that's for sure, it's that centers everywhere, almost every single center that I'm in, or that when I talk to people, that staffing shortages are really significantly impacting them and have been for quite some time. The other piece that you'd see often as a symptom is we eat our young. Like, we are not always nice to new people. We are a bit cynical and jaded about the work that we do. We're so tired of people leaving before they've even finished training that we're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I won't know you for very long. So I'll just keep it cool on the outsides. And we're tough on our new people. We eat our young a lot. Until we recognize that we've got to do better if we want to ever have days off or empower people to want to stay here and keep learning and growing with our teams. Again, I'm not pointing fingers or placing blame. It's the reality that we have in our industry, and it's just important that we say it out loud. It's happening everywhere, and we know it. So that increased illness and absenteeism, absolutely. Like, the more stress and trauma we have, without any way to burn that off or to regulate or to get the support that we need or the downtime we need in between, the sicker we're going to get. That's just the reality of how it's going to work. And so it becomes a vicious cycle all of the time. The more increased illness and absenteeism, the more we have short staffing, the more other people are working overtime. People who were somewhat regulated and hanging on by a thread and or relatively healthy, they're going to start getting burnt out. They're going to start getting sick. And so that vicious cycle continues. Behavior and performance issues, I think this is really important, because particularly when people show up when they're first hired, you have this person you work next to and they're great. You just think they're wonderful, and they show up in a different way now. They've been here for 5 or 6 years. I mean, they can be here for 25 years. When people feel crispy fried, they behave differently because they're not functioning from that place of empowerment where that executive level thinking is happening for them. They're functioning from that burnout mode where they're in constant nervous system dysregulation, and it's really impacting how they're connecting with others. And so you'll see that in behavior and performance issues. So it's really easy for us to just, for lack of a better term, throw the baby out with the bathwater. And say like, well, that's it. Joe's a jerk because he did this thing that was not very nice and he really impacted someone. And so we just need to fire him. When in fact, Joe was like a kick-ass employee for a really long time. And all of a sudden in the last while, he's changed so much. When we can understand what could be going on, where we have compassion for the person, also boundaries, because it doesn't mean if you're having a tough time that you get to come here and treat everybody like crap. That's not okay. But when we have that awareness, we recognize it early, we could intervene and help him out before it ever gets to the state where we have to fire him for something so incredibly egregious that he might have done. Because that's probably not who Joe really is inside, and his behavior is out of alignment with his character. That's a red flag for us to notice. So recognizing it in ourselves, which isn't always easy, which is why I like for people to have this knowledge. You're going to recognize it in your peers way before, and your family will recognize it in you for sure. The people that you live with, ask them if you're brave enough, how you show up when you're dysregulated. It'll be so eye-opening for you. But be nice. Don't lash out at them. Be ready for their honesty. It's eye-opening for sure. So some of the physical signs and symptoms we know, things like you're exhausted all the time, you either barely sleep or you don't sleep enough. Things like headaches, muscle tension. I know for me, when I'm stressed out and I've been dysregulated too long, I've got migraines, chronic tension in my neck, and just a headache all of the time. You're going to get sick way more often than you used to. And then, like I had said before, somatization, that's when our trauma and stress, we don't get to process it. That stays in our systems and in our bodies, and it becomes physical illness. Here on the bottom, you'll see the great books on somatization that I was mentioning, Dr. Gabor Mate, The Myth of Normal. It's a really good book about it. And then The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Great books with a lot of information. I love listening to them on Audible because I'll tell you right now, The Body Keeps the Score is a very thick book. You guys probably work a lot of shifts. If you have the capacity to read it, great. It's a great tool to have on hand, but it's a big book, and Audible is my friend when it comes to that stuff. Okay, so emotional signs and symptoms, our level of anxiety can increase as well as the depression. I know for me, one of the things that I'll do is I'll distance or isolate myself. I'll withdraw from people or activities because I just feel like my batteries are so low and I just can't even. I don't want to connect. You can end up having a lot of like negative self-image or self-talk where you're blaming yourself for things. Cynicism, which apparently is a symptom. I have really cynical humor. I think a lot of us probably do. I didn't realize it was this coping strategy. And I was like, well, you can't take it away from me, even if I know about it, because it's still funny. But cynicism, like true deep cynicism, where you just expect everybody to get it wrong and nothing ever goes right, that's one of the outputs of constant stress and trauma exposure without any kind of regulation. Feeling professional helplessness. I want to talk about this one especially because this is what can really overwhelm us a lot of the time, where we feel like we don't have the power or autonomy to make things different. That's why I like to give people tools at their own individual level to be able to try to help themselves as much as they can, even if they're in an environment where nobody else is doing the things that they could be doing to create those systems and support for each other. You always have yourself, you like remembering that you always have the autonomy to do what you can at your level. And sometimes that might even mean leaving your agency if it's so tough that, they're not doing what they can to support staff and getting the help they need for mental health supports or the impacts of the work. Or it could be reaching out to your employer to explain what could be going on for people, sharing this webinar with them and other tools and resources that you find out there. There are a number of factors. I don't know everybody's individual situation, obviously, but that professional helplessness can really just grind us into a pulp if we are not aware that it's also being fueled by our environment and our work environment and not getting a chance to to work off that stress and trauma and regulate. Um, Depersonalization, which is like just numbing out and desensitizing, and you just think that the world's a scary and bad place and things will never go right and people suck. I know that happens a lot, and it's because of what we're hearing and witnessing in those primary and secondary trauma effects that happen to us when we're on the phone with callers and we hear about stuff that's going on other calls that our coworkers are telling us about. It really does have a massive impact on our well-being. And the last one in the middle is the increased sense of personal vulnerability. What this means is things like, if you can think of a coworker that you've had that thinks that, that routinely thinks, we'd call them paranoid if we didn't know any different, or they think everyone's always out to get them, or if somebody's doing something over in that corner of the room, it must be because they're talking about them, plotting against them, or they don't take feedback well and they decide that someone just thinks that they're not good enough, so they want to get rid of them. When you can tell that it's like really not accurate, right? Like it's like, no, that was not my version and I was there and witnessed it, and that's not the same experience that I had. Your stress and trauma will absolutely create cumulative effects where some people, this is how it will impact them. They'll just feel like everyone's out to get them because deep down it's impacting their worth and their ability to see clearly. So that happens at workplaces all the time. I am very, very familiar with it. I've seen it a ton. I've seen it as like both a peer and as a leader in a center, and had to help people work through it and get the support that they needed so they could understand and then not let it hold them hostage anymore. Behavioral signs and symptoms, obviously, things like it could be anger and irritability. It could be like, simmering rage. It could be just frustration. It could be so depleted that you're at the point of tears most of the time. Increased use in tools like alcohol and drugs to numb you out. Absenteeism, that we talked about before, that you're just not showing up to work, or you have people that show up to work but they avoid work. So they're at work but not really working. Where are they busy out of their 911 line? They're not taking calls. They're just kind of holding back, and it seems like they're being lazy and sloughing off. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people that do that, but that's usually a small percentage. If you've noticed that in someone where it doesn't normally happen, it could be because they're struggling. It could be something that they've heard on a call or something that's going on at home and they're just past their threshold and capacity for managing. Check on those people and see what's going on for them. Help them get the supports that they need. Behavioral signs and symptoms as well, difficulty making decisions. Like you can make life and death decisions all of the time in your work, but then you need to order lunch and it takes you like 6 hours to figure out where you're going to eat from. I mean, that's a norm, I think, in every center. At least it was in ours, and I'm still like that with my husband. So I don't know that it's always about that, but the difficulty making decisions for other important things in your life that aren't the protocol based quick decision making that we make in the comm center all the time. And then your relationships. It can really impact your relationships at work and at home, and with the people in your life when you're just overloaded. Your basket is full and overflowing with stuff that needs to be set down. I wanted to just kind of touch on this one again, and also because this meme is kind of funny, where therapist says you need to let people in and you say it's not locked, but it's a big prickly cactus on the door handle. So this is one of the things that will happen to almost all of us. It will definitely happen at some point. Compassion fatigue is a real thing. You feel emotionally numb and checked out, because that's the only way you're going to be able to survive as you move through this, until something else comes along to disrupt it and you get what you need to be okay again. And so that's a real thing that happens for people in our industry all of the time. I'm pretty sure it's not if, but when it happens to people. It's a coping mechanism. You'll have difficulty listening to stories in others. So, you've gone to work, you've taken some really terrible calls, you've witnessed some awful things happen to humanity. And then, one of your friends or one of your family members is telling you about this story where the consequences and impact are so low grade and minimal that you can't help but be super annoyed by it. Really, that's what you're complaining about? Do you know the calls that I took today? Right? So you have that difficulty being present or tolerating suffering in others, and you're just done. Like you can't even be bothered anymore. It's just easier for you to withdraw and shelter in place with some of your favorite things to self-medicate. Things like eating the foods that maybe aren't the healthiest for us in extreme amounts, drinking drugs, spending a lot of money on Amazon, and, binging Netflix. And when we binge out on Netflix or whatever other is your favorite streaming application, because I'm the same way. It's not on like some cheesy Hallmark Christmas movie or happily ever after. It's like on all of the true crime and the who's catch the serial killer. Like it's all of that kind of stuff that just keeps us in a dysregulated state because that's normal. Yes, it's okay that we like that. We're investigators by nature in this industry, but also that keeps us swimming in that dysregulated stream, and it keeps giving us data and information that says, yes, you're right, the world is a bad, scary place. It's awful out there. Look at what just happened on Dateline. So I'm just saying it's not the most healthiest thing. So maybe limit your exposure when you can. I'm not telling you have to give up on anything. Just notice when you're most likely to do that. It could mean that you're dysregulated. I just want to take a moment and I want you to think about all of the things that we've just chatted about. And I want you to think about what could be your warning signs. What are some of the things that show up for you in your life, whether it's behaviors or physical symptoms or thoughts or actions that you take or things that you do? I want you to just take a moment to think about and write down, like, what are your warning signs? How will you notice when it's happening for you? It's going to be really easy also to see it in others, but take some time to think about that. And if you don't, if nothing's coming to mind right now, then I would encourage you as you go throughout, the next few days, the next week or two, check in and notice, see if something shows up for you. Just be aware. And when I say notice, please do it without judgment. Just know that there's reasons that this is happening. They're just signs. Doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't mean you're not doing it right or not good enough. It just means that you're a human being. You're being impacted by external factors. And the quicker you can notice, the better, the sooner you can get in front of it so it doesn't hold you in its crappy grip and impact you negatively long term. For me, I know that my warning signs, I shared a few, are I'll abandon any sense of like self-care and rest, and I'll just keep working, because then I can feel productive. When I'm in a dysregulated state, that's one of my telling signs. I feel like I don't have enough time for things. Everything feels like it's in a rush. I feel like I'm a helium balloon floating away, and it's hard for me to like be present in my body. And I know why that is, because I've spent time talking to me to be like, what the hell's going on for you, girl? In a loving way. And it's because if I slow down and recognize that I'm not grounded and present and regulated, that means I can't keep working hard at all of the things that feels like there's not enough time for. So notice, like, there's different things that impact each other. It can become a vicious cycle. So just notice when that's happening. And I'm much kinder to myself about it now. I'll get up, I'll do something that helps me get regulated. I'll do some breath work. I'm going to show you some ways to do that in a little while. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is, I don't know about you guys. I feel like a lot of my other colleagues in this industry have shared, when I've shared this with them, they've said the same thing. I didn't realize how much of a shallow breather I am, or like I hold my breath sometimes where I'm just breathing like minimally throughout the day. And so my breath never gets like filled into my lungs. That has a massive physiological impact on us. The more you hold your breath or shallow breathe, the more your body actually thinks that it needs to be in a nervous system activation mode. So you stay dysregulated by not breathing deeply enough, right? So I've had to actually legitimately set timers on my phone to change that habit so that I'm checking in regularly to be like, well, am I shallow breathing? Yes, I am. Okay, let's take some deep breaths. Let's just get centered for a minute, so that I could create habits where my body would start breathing properly. I still have to do it. It's a work in progress. The more stressed I am, or the more I've got on the go at the time, the more likely it is to happen. But at least I know it's a thing now. And it's really helped in such a significant way with my energy and my focus and just how I overall physically feel. So it's a real thing and it totally happens. Okay, so what can we do? What can we do? These are where we're going to get to the tools for how we can notice what's going on for ourselves, recognize our signs and symptoms, disrupt that stress cycle, and then start regulating our system with effective tools. That is what's going to help us widen our window and navigate that stress so that it feels so much better than it did before. We're going to be able to like downshift quicker and regulate and ground, and that increases our resilience and our window of tolerance and keeps us in that optimal zone of function so that no matter what's coming at us, we have the capacity to be able to navigate it really well and and have it not have long-term effects on us. Plus all of the other mental, physical energy bonuses that come with it. So this is a little thing that I do for myself, and I wanted to share it with you. So I put in alarms on my phone at multiple times throughout the day, and I call it radar. So I check my radar, and what I do is I'm just sitting with myself just for a few minutes, and I'm recognizing, okay, like what's going on for me right now? Am I shallow breathing? How I do a body scan, like how's my neck feeling? How's my head feeling? Am I like wearing my shoulders for earrings? And then I check with how am I feeling? Like when I check in with my core, or I do a gut check, what am I feeling right now? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm feeling rushed. Yeah, I'm feeling anxious about something, like, And I do it with curiosity, not with judgment, just with curiosity. They're just signs and symptoms. That's all they are. And I need to figure out if I can check in with myself regularly throughout the day, I will stay more regulated as I go. So I just acknowledge that that's what's going on. With, like I said, with some self-compassion, which isn't always easy for us. And then I figure out, okay, what am I going to do to change this? So I might do like a little bit of breath work. I might get up and move around. I might go for a little bit of a walk. It depends on what's going on in that moment in my day. But I have a number of tools I can use that are just really easy to put into play, that aren't elaborate or take a bunch of time. I could just do like a body scan and just sit there to get mindful and back into myself, is what I call it, so that I'm not floating away like a helium balloon, and I'm present and grounded. That's what helps me regulate my system. And the more often I do it, the longer it lasts. So when I'm regularly doing that for myself, when I get up in the morning, certain times throughout my day, it's part of my like going to bed routine, so that I'm going to bed in a regulated state. It makes a massive difference. And here's the deal. Sometimes it's so simple that I know there's times I didn't want to do it. I was like, there's no way that can work. Nah, it's not worth it. Like, what do you mean it's only going to take a few minutes? I'm telling you, it does. It's been a game changer for me in such a magnificent way. And that's why I want to share it with you. So putting it on your radar. Again, the radar, as you know, the acronym is there to just kind of tell you what all of the steps are for checking your radar. You're going to have access to the slide deck once we're done as well. I have a downloadable for you and a couple of other tools. So don't worry, you can have that back in front of you if you need to read it again to see what those are. So here's some of the tools that I like, that are really easily accessible wherever you are. They don't cost anything. They are really great resources for quickly regulating your system. So like it takes like 90 seconds or less. If you've only got a few minutes, then you've absolutely got time to be able to do this for yourself. And I mean, like, part of your check your radar, especially when you're at work, it could be just when you're going to the bathroom. It just could be when you're in the bathroom. Every time you're in there, or you're going in there, you're going to create that habit stacking, where you attach that habit of checking in with yourself to the act of, well, I've got to use the facilities, so I'm also going to take this moment to just check in with myself and see how I'm doing, and then do what I need to do to regulate. So breath work. There's all kinds of breath work. Not all of it is regulating, but a lot of it is. So make sure it's the kind for for downshifting your system, and that it actually doesn't activate your nervous system and hijack you, because that's going to have a negative effect on you. And that's not always what you want. All the kinds of breath work are good, but all in their own environment. So make sure it's the one that regulates your nervous system. I do have a download for you. I have an amazing friend and colleague, Chelsea, who is a breathwork practitioner, and she does it for calm, clarity, and flow. And so she has kindly allowed me to share that with you. It's a great little 5 or 6 minute session that is guided for you, and it is absolutely grounding. So the other piece is mindfulness. And again, I don't know about you, but when I try to meditate, when I'm in a dysregulated state, it's really hard for me to do that. I get monkey brain. It just, it's hard for me to focus on the one thing or my one breath. So just being mindful to your surroundings. I do have a guided mindfulness ground and release technique that I've recorded for you, and I'm going to share with you at the end. There's a downloadable that you can have for that, where it's just a few minutes long, but it helps me guide you through, so that if your mind's wandering, it's just a little bit easier to focus on someone's voice. And that's going to help you just find that way to just get back into your body, be mindful and present, and help you have some regulation in your system. You can do this in a number of ways, though. Mindfulness is also about noticing your breath, looking at the room around you. What are some things you can see or notice? And then the other one, emotional freedom technique, or tapping, if you're familiar with that. That is also a game changer, but be very mindful of when you're tapping to not continuously do it over and over and over again in one session if you're feeling activated, because it could have a negative and opposite effect. So making sure that you're checking in. I do have some tools that are going to go out about that for emotional freedom technique. I do conscious EFT. I'm becoming a practitioner because it's such a game changer for processing trauma in the moment. If you're familiar with EMDR, it works a lot of the same way, but I don't have to go tap into your trauma to do it. So if you're interested in more of that, keep in touch and I'm happy to give you more information. And then movement, any kind. If you just get up and stretch, just move your body in some way, shape, or form, even for just a short while, it changes the game for you and it can help you do some regulation. And then the last one is vagus nerve reset. I'm going to teach you that here just quickly on this session so that you kind of have an idea of how easy it could be and how accessible it could be. So just on the bottom there, it says like these aren't standalone tools to replace any kind of other healing or trauma recovery. And I want to be very mindful of that. These are complementary to other things that you might use to help you with some of the bigger systemic issues that are going on, whether that's like medical doctors or you're going for trauma, first responder specific, therapy services to help work through some of the stuff that you've got on your plate, which I highly recommend and think that is just a part of regular routine maintenance. It helps us really, really thrive. So these are complementary and not in place of. So I want to talk to you a bit about breath work and the vagus nerve and how that is also really powerful. So if you don't know what the vagus nerve is, it's the cranial nerve. It's the longest nerve actually that runs in your body from your brain all the way down the sides of your face, right behind your ears and down your neck, all the way into the abdomen. And so this sucker is responsible for toggling us back and forth between regulation and dysregulation. So it'll activate your fight, flight, or freeze. And then it also activates your what we call rest and digest, which is a calm or a regulated state. This is where I wanted to also just remind you that those short, rapid breathing cycles that we sometimes have, or if we breath hold when we're on a call in the center, it can activate our dysregulation cycle. So our vagus nerve thinks, oh, something's wrong. Okay, I'm going to put us into that fight or flight response and put us in a dysregulated state. So that's why breath work is foundational for those long, deep inhales and exhales. It lets the body know that it's safe. It's especially the exhale that really tells the body it's safe and helps shift you back in to that calm, regulated parasympathetic state. So again, breath work, the vagus nerve reset, both of those things are effective and within minutes can make a difference, and it is easily accessible anywhere. I'm going to teach you a vagus nerve reset. If you've never done it before, this is a really cool thing. You can do it anytime. You can do it right at your console if you can't get up and move around even. So if you turn your head as far to the right as you can, and then as far to the left as you can, I just want you to do it quickly without hurting yourself, so that you can notice what your current range of motion is. So here's my range of motion in my neck right now. Then I want you to look straight forward and then hold your head straight. I want you just to look with your eyes all the way to the left or the right, whichever you choose. Pick a side first, look all the way to the side as far as your eyes will go. And then I want you to notice, typically mine happens in a yawn, or it can mean I just took a deep breath. My body will try to get me to do something to regulate itself. And so once that happens, I ended up taking a deep breath. I'm going to turn my eyes to the other side all the way. And so the same thing happens. Yeah, and then I just got like forced to take a deep breath. Typically I yawn, but I actually did this right before I came on the webinar and I had like giant yawns, which is why it's not happening now. Okay, and then, oh, I'm gonna yawn one more time. Sorry. So that, after you've done that, I want you to turn your head again, turn your neck to the left and the right. Like my head turns way further than it did before. And that's because we have activated that vagus nerve, which was keeping our neck actually like stiff and rigid and keeping us in a bit of a maybe an activated state or tense. It actually helps release all of that. And it's just helped my system understand that it's safe and it's calm. Like that's the thing that's different if you turn your head all the way back and forth. Obviously, I love doing this in a live environment, but I really hope that you're trying it on your own at home. It's so easy to do. It's easy to teach other people around you. It makes a huge difference in ways that I didn't ever expect it to. And it's just so easy and quick. Okay, so mindfulness, again, one of those practices are the five senses and noticing. So one of the things that you can do if you can't, go and do a guided audio right in the moment or anything else for mindfulness, I like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So just, I want you to notice five things around you can see, and I want you to list them in your head. I want you to try to find four things you can hear, three things you can touch, two things you can smell, and one thing you can taste. It really just brings you right back into yourself, and just noticing and present. And you will like the sensation of being out there to here is remarkably different. And it doesn't take very long at all. And you can do it with other people. I often do it with the little ones in my life when they just need a moment and they are all kinds of dysregulated. It's a little more acceptable to have a massive tantrum when you're 4 than it is when you're 45. So people look at you funny when you're 45. I mean, I won't look at you funny, but other people might. So it's just helpful to do something that, and they're just doing that to try and regulate their nervous systems. We can do the five senses and noticing. It's a little more socially acceptable when you're my age or around my age. The other one that I'm going to make sure you have a download, access to the download at the end of this is the ground and release body scan. Breath work in the moment, if you don't have a lot of time, or breath work classes are great too if you can find one to attend. But even just box breathing, where you're like inhaling for a count of 4, you hold it for a count of 4, you exhale for a count of 4, and then you hold that for a count of 4. And then you can repeat it a number of rounds of the 4 in, hold, 4 out, hold. When you're doing all kinds of things, even if you're just like sitting at your desk, if you're refined to your desk for the time being, if you need to go and have a difficult conversation, if you're having a difficult conversation, if when you're driving, whatever it is, it's easily accessible. It is super regulating, and it's easy to remember how to do. The breath work for regulation, clarity, and flow. I do have a 6-minute guided session for you from my colleague and friend Chelsea, who is a breathwork practitioner and works with a lot of us in trauma exposed professions. So that's going to be a great download for you to use as well. And then I know we only have a few more minutes, so I just want to chat quickly about finding ways to, now that you have the tools, how can you create habits or integrate it into your everyday that's easy and not overwhelming and one more thing on your task list that you have to do, because that's exhausting and nobody wants that. So just even knowing and noticing when and where you're getting hijacked so that you can anticipate when you're going to have those challenges and you can plan accordingly for them. Any small change, just celebrate it, because over time with consistency, it adds up to a massive impact. We don't go from 0 to 100% for creating a new habit. It takes time, but stack it on another activity or habit that you already have. For example, when I brush my teeth in the morning, that's when I take any medicine that I might be on, because it's automatic. I do it. It's part of the package now, and it's almost on autopilot where I have to remember, did I take that or didn't I? So those small things and habit stacking for creating habits will absolutely make a difference and make it easier to integrate into your everyday in just a few minutes at a time. Put it on your radar. I have those radar phones or those radar alarms that come up on my phone every 3 hours or so during the day, just to get me in the flow of checking in with myself. I realize it's not always convenient. Sometimes it might be in the middle of a call and you can't. That's okay. Get to it when you can afterward. And then just acknowledge and celebrate every time you show up for yourself and you do the things that you need to do to take good care of yourself. That is really important because it's not always easy to do. And then what I loved what we did in the Red Deer Center when I was working there is I saw that our teams, we talk about these things, but our teams would support and challenge each other to take a moment to check in and regulate. They would do some of the coolest, funnest things, and they would just gamify it. And then it makes it easily accessible and super rewarding for everyone to be involved. And it makes it normal that taking care of yourself is good. We encourage each other to do it and we're doing it together. So how cool is that? This is where if you can grab your phone and just scan the QR code, that's going to take you to a downloadable with all of those tools, the 911 for 911 toolkit that we talked about here on this session. And it'll also give you the slide deck with some of the other information you might want so that you can share it with the rest of your team. And with that, I would just like to say thank you so much for your time and energy today and for showing up, whether you're watching this on the replay or you're watching this live. It is definitely my privilege to be able to bring the things that I learn and the tools that I can learn and or create to the rest of my sisters and brothers out here in the industry. You are my very favorite. I am out here doing whatever I can to make a difference for you and for all of us in this industry. So I just also want to say thank you so much for the work that you do. You don't hear it often enough, but you guys are absolute heroes, and I'm so incredibly proud for you. So I'm sending you much love, whatever corner of the world that you are watching from and working within. And I wish you all the very best, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and everybody. I did drop the link in the chat for you to download your certificate for today, and make sure that you follow us on Facebook to know when the next one will be. I hope that everyone has a good day.
Thank you so much. Take care,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.